Welcome back to the Sum of Poker, Sculpting the Game. I'm Terry Wood, and this is episode 2 in our series. In this video, we're going deep into the math that drives poker. Not just the pre-flop numbers you see repeated everywhere. We're going from pre-flop to river, breaking down how odds, probabilities, and real decision-making evolve across every street. Let's be clear, this isn't a video full of rules. It's about understanding poker's underlying structure, the part that tells you what's likely, what's possible, and what's profitable. We will discuss the odds of being dealt specific starting hands, what the flop is most likely to bring you and your opponents, how turn and river math guides your drawing decisions. Let's get started. Before the flop even hits the felt, the math has already begun. There are 1,326 possible pre-flop starting hands. Once you have seen your first two cards, there are 19,600 different possible flop combinations. There are 1,081 possible turn and river combinations. Taken individually, there are 47 turns and 46 rivers. There are a total of 2,598,960 five-card hands possible. Out of those 1,326 starting hands, 312 are suited. That's 24% of the time you will be dealt suited cards. 78 are pocket pairs, 6% of your hands. And the rest 936, a full 70%, are unsuited hands. Now let's flip that view. Think of it this way. When you dealt a hand, 41% of the time, it will contain cards that could form a straight. 10% of the time, you'll have suited cards, potential for a flush. 14% of the time, your hand could turn into either a straight or a flush or even a straight flush. You'll be dealt a pocket card just 6% of the time. And 29% of the time, you're looking at what we'd call pure trash, hands with no clear potential. Now let's talk specifics. Because most players dramatically overestimate how often these hands come. Pocket aces, or any specific pocket pair, that's just 0.45% of the time, or once every 221 hands. Ace king offsuit, 0.9%, about once every 110 hands. Ace king suited, only 0.3%, or once every 332 hands. Any suited ace X? That's about 4%, or once every 24 hands. Want those beautiful Broadway connective hands? Two connected cards like Jack 10? About 16%, once every 5.25 hands. How about those King X hands? Any King X, suited or not? That's around 15%, or once every 5.67 hands. King X suited. That's about 4%, or 24 to 1 odds. Want face cards? At least one face card? That happens 42% of the time, about 1.4 to 1. Two cards kings or higher. Just 2%, that's 49 to 1. Two cards queens or higher. 5% or 19 to 1. Two cards jacks or higher. 9% or 10 to 1. Two cards tens or higher. About 14%, roughly 6 to 1 odds. Why does all this matter? Because poker isn't just about recognizing the cards you like. It's about understanding how rare they actually are. And once you realize how often you're dealt strong hands, or speculative hands, or nothing at all, it changes how you approach every single spot pre-flop. Up next, we break down the real story behind the flop, turn, and river. What's the probability you actually hit your set? How often does that flush draw come in by the river? If pre-flop is about probability and preparation, the flop is where those probabilities begin to reveal themselves. Once you've seen the flop and your two pocket cards, you have now seen 71.5% of the total cards you will use to make your hand. The turn and river represent 28.5% of the total. Let's take a look at what the flop gives us and how often it gives it. Flop textures by suit. Two cards of the same suit happens about 55% of the time. That means more than half the time, you'll be looking at the possibility that someone has flopped a flush draw. Three cards of the same suit, only about 5%. That's a wet flop, and it sets off alarm bells for flushes. Three cards, all different suits, around 40% of flops come rainbow. These are generally considered dry flops, and they drastically reduce draw potential. Flop textures by rank. Paired boards, you'll see at least one pair on the flop around 17% of the time. Trips, all three cards the same rank super rare, just 0.24%, or once every 415 hands. What if you hold a pocket pair? Flopping a set, your odds are about 11.8%, or roughly 7.5 to 1. So if you're set mining, make sure the price is right. Flopping two pair with unpaired pocket cards, only about 2% or 49 to 1 odds. Flopping at least one pair with two unpaired cards, you'll do that 32% of the time, or about 1 in 3. And the infamous ace-king hand. It looks great in your hand, but what happens when the flop comes? The probability of exactly one ace or one king on the flop is 32.4%. To flop both one ace and one king on the flop, rare 2.02%. The flop will contain ace, ace, king or king, king, ace just 0.04%. Flopping three aces or three kings, practically never, 0.005%. The probability to flop a straight queen jack 10, just 0.32%. Bottom line, ace king hits something good about 33% of the time, but that means 2/3 of the time you've got two big cards and a whole lot of air. Add suitedness to ace king, and now you've got a 10.9% chance of flopping a flush draw, which brings the total hit rate up to 43.9%. That's the hidden value of ace king suited. Flush draws. With two suited whole cards, you'll flop a flush only 0.82% of the time, 121 to 1 odds. Flop the flush draw 10.9%, or about 1 in 9 odds. Make the flush by the river, about 6.5%. This means you're about 15 to 1 odds to make a flush, with two suited pocket cards, pre-flop to river. Straight potential on the flop. This is where things get interesting. The flop will contain two sequential cards about 40% of the time. With strong connectors like 8, 7, or 9, 10, you'll flop a straight around 1.29% of the time, or 77.5 to 1 odds. One gap or two gap hands, still about 1% to hit the flop straight. Three gap connectors, now you're down to 0.33%, a long shot. If you have connectors in the middle, such as 8, 7, you have 4 possible ways of making a straight. If you have a one gap hand in the middle, such as 8, 6, there are now 3 possible ways of making a straight. With 2 gaps, you have only 2 ways to make a straight. With 3 gaps, you have only 1 way to make a straight. Also, the closer you are to the end, the less chance you have of making a straight. And remember, just because your hand can make a straight doesn't mean it's likely to. That's why suited connectors are beloved. They give you multiple paths to straights, flushes, 2 pair, although most of them are long odds. Now we've seen the flop. Whether you've hit top pair, picked up a draw, or completely whiffed, it's what happens next that separates the disciplined from the desperate. Let's talk about the mouth of the turn and river, because this is where the pot gets big and then the stakes get costly. And remember, at this point, you have seen 71.5% of the total 7 cards. The turn and river will make up the remaining 28.5% of our hand. Every time you're on a draw, whether it's a flush, straight, or even a backdoor hand, you need to know how many outs you have and what those outs actually mean. Let's break it down. After the flop, you have a flush draw, meaning 4 cards to a flush, the 2 in your hand, and the 2 on the board. There are 9 remaining cards of your suit in the deck, your outs. The probability of hitting one of your outs on the turn is 19%, or 4.22 to 1 odds. If you miss the turn, you now have a 20% probability of hitting one of your outs on the river, or 4.11 to 1 odds. Your total probability for the turn and river combined is 35%, or 1.86 to 1 odds. Following the same process as with the flush draw, let's look at an open-ended straight draw. You have 8 outs. On the turn, you have a 17% probability of hitting one of your outs, or 4.88 to 1 odds. For the river, it's 17%, or 4.75 to 1 odds. Combined turn and river there is a 32% probability or 2.17 to 1 odds. How about a guy shot straight draw? You have 4 outs. On the turn, that's a 9% probability of hitting one of the outs or 10.75 to 1 odds. And for the river, it's a 9% chance or 10.50 to 1 odds. Combined, turn and river, there's a 17% chance of completing the straight or 4.88 to 1 odds. Miss those odds? You're throwing chips at a fantasy. Understand that? You're sculpting your game with precision. How about 2 non-pair cards improving to a pair or better? For the turn and river combined, that's 24% or 3.17 to 1 odds. On the turn, 13%, 6.83 to 1 odds. On the river, 13%, 6.67 to 1 odds. A pair improving to a set or better. With the turn and river to come, it's 8%, 11.5 to 1 odds. On the turn, 4%, 22.5 to 1 odds. On the river, 4%, 22 to 1 odds. Let's say 4%. That's a great spot. But what are the odds of improving further? Set improving to full house or quads. Counting both the turn and river, there is a 33% probability, 2 to 1 odds. On the turn alone, 15%, 5.7 to 1 odds. On the river alone, 22%, 3.60 to 1 odds. That extra firepower can be key in monster pots, that if the board tears and you're not the one holding trips, you need to know what you're really up against. You've probably seen these kind of flops, 3 cards to a flush, or 3 in a row that screams straight draw. What happens when those textures continue to develop? With 3 cards or more to a straight on the board, there's a 75% chance someone has a straight. With 3 cards or more of a single suit on board, there's at least a 37% chance someone made a flush. With a pair, 2 pair, or twips on board, you're looking at 49% plus chance of a full house somewhere. This is why understanding board texture and what others could be drawing to is essential. It's not about what you have. It's about what they might have. Want to take this a step further? We've built a visual chart showing outs and their corresponding odds, broken down by the turn, the river, and turn plus river combined. Whether you've got 4 outs or 14, you'll know the real math behind your decision. This full chart is available as a free download in the companion resources section at pokerrailbird.com. It's one of the most used tools in my game. You will also find similar charts that show the probabilities for flushes, straight draws, overcard probabilities, and many others. Understanding what hits and how often is key to interpreting the flop. When you look at the flop, you're not just reacting, you're calculating. What did I hit? What could I hit? And what might they not hit? That last question takes us into the next part of the video, understanding what your opponents are likely to be holding and how that impacts your decision-making from here on out. Let's get into that. Although it is important for you to know how often things will happen to you, it's even more important to understand what everyone else at the table has and the potential impact of the flop on their hands. Loose opponents play almost any 2 cards, including connectors, 1 gap cards, 2 gap cards, and any 2 seated. They also play ace anything and king anything. This table illustrates what would occur on average with every hand at a 9-handed table. We realize that not every hand is average, that this layout is important for you to understand, especially when you are playing at a loose table. What about if you hold a pocket pair pre-flop? As an example, let's say you have a pair of 8s pre-flop. What is the probability of another player in a 9-handed game holding a pocket pair better than your 8s? If there are, say, 7 players to the flop, then the probability of a player holding a higher pair is 21%. How do you get that number? Count the number of players remaining in the hand, multiply it by the number of pairs that will beat your pair. In this case, there's 6 pair that will beat your 8s. 6 pairs times 7 players equals 42. Then divide that by 2 equals 21%. Here's a chart which will show this. You can find this at pokerrailbird.com in our companion resource section. Most players, even experienced ones, believe 2 pair or better win most of the pots. An overpair or top pair with a good kicker, jacks or higher, will win more hands than it will lose, even at a 9-handed table. In turn, that means when you have an overpair or a pair with a high kicker, you should be aggressive to knock out the draws, because in the long run you will win much more than you will lose. The second point is if you don't catch, unless the numbers are right, release immediately. The last point is when there is heavy betting by someone other than you. The likelihood of your pair holding up decreases. The high pair does very well when in many small pots, but if that is all you have, it does poorly in big pots. Let's talk about the most overplayed hand type in poker, ace anything. What if you hold ace 8? First, at a 9-handed table, there is a 75% probability that another player also holds an ace, and possibly with a better kicker than your 8. This chart shows you the probability of any opponent holding an ace with a higher kicker, an ace with the same kicker, an ace with same kicker as you, that's suited, or a pocket pair. Where the probability is over 50%, this area is shaded in green. Of particular interest is that when you hold ace-king, someone else at a 9-handed table is usually ahead of you before the flop. You can also find this chart in our companion resource section at pokerrailbird.com. You will have suited cards 24% of the time. But what about your opponents? Here you see two charts. The one in the upper left-hand screen details the probability of another player having two of the same suit as you have. As you can see, if there were 9 players dealt into the hand, there is a 35.6% probability that one of them has two of the same suit as you have. The chart on the bottom right tells you the probability that your highest ranking card is of being outranked by one of your opponents. As an example, if you had 9, 10 suited, there is a 61.8% probability that if one of your opponents has 2 cards of your suit, that you are outranked regarding high card. This is what makes flush draws, holding low-ranking suited cards or connectors, a marginal play at best. Think about it if you make an 8 high flush, because you chose to play that 7, 8 suited. Do you really feel comfortable betting it? And what do you do if you get raised? Or, even worse, the 4th card of your suit appears on the board. As the hand develops, it becomes easier to predict your opponent's cards. Using logic to reduce and eliminate possibilities, observing their betting patterns, what each opponent's play style is, loose aggressive, etc., physical tells, board texture, and their position. Any flop with 2 high cards is dangerous. A flop with 3 high cards is treacherous. If 2 or more of these high cards are suited, look out. If there are 2 or more opponents betting and raising on the flop, it must you either have a great hand, not just a good hand, or you have a positive expected value draw to a great hand. Get out and save your chips for a better opportunity. So now you've got the numbers. We know how often certain hands appear. We've seen what the board is likely to bring. And we understand the probability that someone else may already have our hand beat. But all of that means nothing if we don't apply the math and logic. The pocket pair dilemma. What should you do? You don't pocket 8s under the gun in a full ring cash game. You raise. You get 4 callers, and you will be first to act the rest of the hand, as you are the under the gun player. Flop comes Queen of Diamonds, 9 of Spades, and the 3 of Clubs. What are the chances of someone having a better pair than you right now? 4 players went to the flop. 6 pocket pairs beat your 8s. 6 pocket pair that beat your 8s times 4 players equals 24. Divide the 24 by 2, and there is a 12% chance of a higher pair just by pocket holdings. But now factor in the overcard on the board. There's an 85% chance that an overcard to the pocket 8s hits the flop. There it is, queen. And if someone has ace-queen or king-queen or queen-anything, they're ahead, and they're likely to stay there, at least as it regards our pocket 8s. So what do? Because you raised pre-flop, do you continuation that, like the rule says? This is where sculpting comes in. Your probability of hitting another 8 on the turn or river is about 22.5 to 1 odds. I must have to check around here on folding this hand. If there's a bet, and most likely there will be, then you will never be getting the correct pot odds to call. That's applying math. That's sculpting your game. The flush draw trap. Know what you are drawing to. You've got Jack of Hearts and the 7 of Hearts. The flop comes 2 of Hearts, 9 of Spades, and the 5 of Hearts. You've got the draw. There's a bet in front of you. Should you call, raise, or fold? Let's back up. You know that you'll make your flush by the river about 35% of the time. There's a 35.6% chance someone else also holds two hearts. And with the jack-high draw, there's a 49.1% chance they have a higher heart. So ask the real question. If I made my flush, do I even win? Poker is situational, and that is a question that could only be answered by knowing that particular situation. The point is that we should be asking that question. That's how math informs discipline. It's not just about pot odds, it's about value if you hit. Now, we've only walked through two example scenarios here, the potted eights and the flush draw. But they highlight something bigger than just the hands we're holding. With this shell is that the math is always in play. From the flop to the river, we've seen how even small shifts in probability can carry big consequences. The difference between a call and a fold, between profit and pain. This episode, Poker Math Fundamentals, From Flop to River, is just one part of a larger journey. It's the second video in our ongoing series, The Sum of Poker, Sculpting the Game. In our next installment, Poker Math, Pre-Flop to River, Part 2, we'll dive even deeper. We'll explore combinatorics, blockers, pot odds, and how to make razor-sharp drawing decisions when the pressure is at its peak. If you found the charts in this video helpful, you're in luck. All of the hand probability charts we used are free to download at pokerrailbird.com. We've dropped the link for you in the comments section below. And hey, if this content helped sharpen your game or gave you something new to think about, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment with your thoughts, or let us know what topics you'd love to see covered next. Every interaction helps us grow this community of serious, inking poker players. I'm Terry Wood from pokerrailbird.com, and we'll see you at the tables.